My brother mocked me at my niece's birthday. "You'll always be a loser," he laughed, forgetting. My brother mocked me at my niece's birthday. "You'll always be a loser," he laughed, forgetting that I was the one paying for everything. For years, he treated me like the family failure. No matter what I did, it was never enough. He had the perfect life, the perfect wife, the perfect house. And me? I was just the screw-up little brother. But what he didn't realize, I had spent the last few years working in silence. And while he was busy mocking me, I was the reason his daughter even had a birthday party to celebrate. So, when the moment was right, I made sure he never forgot it. Before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. Growing up, my brother Ryan was always the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, the one my parents bragged about at every family gathering. Football star, top of his class, got married young, had the perfect family. And me, I was the screw-up, the one who struggled through school, bounced between jobs, and never seemed to get it together. At least, that's how Ryan saw me. It didn't matter that I had been working my ass off to build something for myself. To him, I was always a joke. So when he invited me to his daughter's 5th birthday party, I knew what to expect. The usual, the snide comments, the backhanded compliments, the subtle digs about how much better he was than me. And normally, I would just let it slide. But this time, Ryan took it too far. I arrived at my niece's birthday party with a gift in one hand and a sense of dread in the other. I knew exactly how the day was going to go. Ryan playing the perfect family man, my parents doting over him, and me being treated like some charity case who was just lucky to be invited. But I came anyway. Not for Ryan, not for my parents, but for my niece. The backyard was packed with kids running around, decorations strung up across the fence, and a bounce house in the middle of it all. It looked like something straight out of a magazine. Ryan was in the center of it, laughing with his friends, playing the charming host. The second he spotted me, his smirk grew. "Well, well, look who actually showed up," he called out, loud enough for everyone to hear. A few people chuckled, and I forced a tight smile. "Good to see you too, Ryan," I said, keeping my voice even. I wasn't about to let him get under my skin, not yet. He patted my back a little too hard. "Man, it must be nice having all this free time, huh? No wife, no kids, no real job stressing you out." More laughter. My jaw tightened, but I let it slide. I knew exactly what he was doing. He was putting on a show for his audience, making sure everyone saw just how much better he was than me. As the party went on, it was more of the same. Every time I walked past, I'd hear little jabs thrown my way. "Don't eat too much, gotta save money, right?" Or, "You still working that little gig thing?" Like everything I did was some kind of joke. I gritted my teeth and kept my cool. But then, right in front of everyone, he took it too far. I was standing near the cake table when Ryan raised his glass, a beer in hand. "You know," he said, grinning, "I gotta give a shout out to my little brother here. He's proof that no matter how far behind you fall in life, you can still show up for a free meal." The crowd burst into laughter. That was it. I set my drink down, took a slow breath, and smiled. "You're right, Ryan. I do show up. And it's funny, because if I didn't, there wouldn't even be a birthday party today." The laughter died instantly. Ryan's grin froze, confusion flickering across his face. "What are you talking about?" he scoffed, but I could see the uncertainty creeping in. I turned to his wife, Melissa, who was standing nearby, her expression already guilty. "Melissa, you want to tell him? Or should I?" The backyard, which had been filled with laughter just seconds ago, was now dead silent. Every pair of eyes was locked on me, waiting to see what I would say next. Ryan, still smirking like he was in control of the situation, turned to Melissa. "What's he talking about?" he asked, his voice tight. Melissa shifted uncomfortably, her eyes darting between me and Ryan. She knew exactly what I was referring to, and now, with the attention of everyone at the party on us, she had no way to cover for him. She swallowed hard and finally muttered, "Ryan, I was gonna tell you, but..." Ryan's smirk disappeared, his jaw clenched. "Tell me what?" I took a step forward, making sure my voice was loud enough for everyone to hear. "Melissa reached out to me 2 months ago, told me things were tight. That between the mortgage, the car payments, and all the other bills, you guys didn't have the money for a big party this year. I let the words sink in before continuing. So she asked me for help. Ryan's face turned red. That's bullshit, he snapped, but his voice wasn't as steady as before. He was rattled. He knew I wasn't lying, but he couldn't afford to admit it in front of all his friends. I ignored him and looked at Melissa. Tell him, she sighed, avoiding his glare. Ryan, I didn't want to stress you out. I knew you'd say no to cutting back on other things, and I didn't want Emma to go without a birthday party. So, I asked your brother if he could help cover the costs. Murmurs spread through the crowd. People were catching on. This wasn't just some joke anymore. This was real. Ryan turned back to me, his face twisted with anger. You expect me to believe that you paid for this party? I smiled, reaching into my pocket and pulling out my phone. A few taps later, I held it up for him to see. Go ahead, look at the transaction history, venue deposit, decorations, catering, cake, all of it. I paused before adding, so yeah, Ryan. While you were busy playing the role of the perfect husband and father, I was the one making sure your daughter actually had a birthday party. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. He looked like he'd just been punched in the gut. His friends were staring at him, some whispering to each other. The humiliation was setting in. And then, just to drive it home, I shrugged and added, guess that makes me the real provider here, huh? Ryan's fists clenched, his face burning with embarrassment. For the first time in his life, he had nothing to say. Ryan's face twisted with anger, his fists clenching at his sides. He opened his mouth like he wanted to argue, but for once he had nothing to say. The humiliation of it all was hitting him hard. Melissa sighed, shaking her head. Ryan, don't even start. You knew we were struggling, but you insisted on keeping up appearances instead of being honest. And now, look where that got you. The whispers in the crowd grew louder. A few of his friends exchanged knowing looks, some even chuckling under their breath. It was clear that everyone was enjoying watching Mr. Perfect Life get a taste of reality. Ryan turned to me, his face still burning red. So what? You think you're better than me now? Because you threw some money at my kid's birthday party? I let out a low laugh. No, Ryan, I think I'm better than you because when your family needed help, I actually stepped up. Meanwhile, you were too busy pretending everything was fine while living beyond your means. His nostrils flared. I didn't ask for your help, I shrugged. Yeah, because your pride wouldn't let you. But your wife did, because she actually cares about your daughter having a good childhood, instead of worrying about whether or not you look successful in front of your friends. A few gasps from the crowd. Ryan's eyes flickered toward Melissa, betrayal all over his face. You really went behind my back and asked him for money? Melissa rolled her eyes. Ryan, we couldn't afford this party. What did you expect me to do? Cancel everything and disappoint Emma? Watch her cry on her birthday because her dad can't admit he's not as well off as he pretends to be? Ryan opened his mouth, then shut it. He had no comeback. I could see the wheels turning in his head. He knew that if he kept fighting, he'd just look like a child throwing a tantrum. So, instead, he tried to save face. He scoffed, forcing a smirk. Whatever, man. If throwing money around makes you feel important, go for it. Doesn't change the fact that you're still the same loser you've always been. I grinned, because I knew exactly how to end this. I stepped closer, lowering my voice just enough so that only he could hear. You can call me a loser all you want, Ryan. But at the end of the day, your daughter is hugging me right now. Not you. Ryan's face fell. Because it was true. While he was busy trying to keep his ego intact, his own daughter was clinging to my leg, her little arms wrapped around me because she actually liked having me there. Ryan had spent his whole life trying to be the man everyone admired, and in this moment, he realized that the only thing people saw was a grown man who just got humbled in front of his entire family. Ryan wasn't used to losing. His whole life, he had been the one in control, the golden boy, the success story, the guy everyone looked up to. But now, his own daughter was holding on to me instead of him. His own wife had exposed his financial struggles, and his friends and family had just watched him get taken down in front of everyone. He was fuming, but he knew there was no way out of this. His pride was too big to apologize, so he did the only thing he knew how to do. He ran. With an angry grunt, he shoved past me, storming toward the house. "Party's over," he barked. "Everybody out." The guests hesitated, glancing around awkwardly. Some of the moms looked at Melissa, as if waiting for her to step in and say, "Ignore him, the party's still on." But she didn't. She just crossed her arms and let out a long sigh. "Wow, Ryan, really mature." Ryan didn't respond. He slammed the back door shut behind him, disappearing inside the house. A few people muttered under their breath, shaking their heads. One of his friends even whispered, "Man, what a baby," before downing the rest of his drink and heading for the exit. Melissa forced a smile for the remaining guests. "You guys can stay if you want. Emma's still having fun." But the mood had already shifted. Parents started gathering their kids, making polite excuses, and within 10 minutes, the party had died completely. Melissa crouched next to Emma, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Sweetie, why don't you go play in the bounce house for a little while longer? I'll come get you when it's time for cake." Emma nodded, but I could tell she had picked up on the tension. Even at 5 years old, she could sense that something was wrong. As she ran off, Melissa let out a long breath and turned to me. "I'm so sorry about all of this." I shook my head. "Not your fault. Ryan was looking for a fight the second I walked through that door." She ran a hand through her hair. "Yeah, but he just embarrassed himself in front of all his friends and family. He's never gonna let this go." I smirked. "Oh, I know, and I can't wait to see how he tries to spin this one. Because if there was one thing I knew about my brother, he was never going to admit he lost." The party was over, but the drama, just getting started. I helped Melissa clean up while Emma played in the bounce house, the energy of the party still buzzing in her little world. Meanwhile, Ryan was holed up inside, probably stewing in his own humiliation. I knew my brother. He wasn't the type to admit defeat. He was already plotting his comeback. And sure enough, as I was stacking plates onto the counter, I heard the door swing open hard enough to rattle the frame. Ryan stood in the doorway, his face still red with embarrassment, but now it was mixed with something else, pure anger. "You think you're some kind of hero, huh?" His voice was low, but his tone was deadly. I didn't even look up from what I was doing. "Not a hero, just the guy who made sure your kid actually had a birthday party." Melissa sighed. "Ryan, don't start." He ignored her, stepping closer. "You think this makes you better than me?" I wiped my hands on a napkin and finally turned to face him. "I think this makes me someone who steps up when it matters, unlike you." That did it. Ryan lunged forward, getting right in my face. He wasn't dumb enough to throw a punch, not here, not with his wife and daughter in the next room, but he wanted me to back down. I didn't. "You love playing the victim, don't you?" he hissed. "You spent your whole life being a loser, and now, just because you threw some cash around, you think you're suddenly the successful one?" I stared at him for a long moment before smirking. "No, Ryan, I think I'm the one who doesn't have to fake success." He flinched like I had just slapped him. Because we both knew the truth. Ryan had spent years building an image of perfection. The nice house, the expensive car, the big backyard birthday parties. It was all part of the illusion. But the second money got tight, it all crumbled. I had money because I was smart with it, because I worked hard and didn't blow it on impressing other people. Ryan had nothing, and the worst part, he knew it. Melissa finally stepped between us, placing a hand on his chest. "Ryan, stop. This isn't helping anything." Ryan looked at her, looked at me, then let out a bitter laugh. "Unbelievable. You two are acting like I'm the bad guy here." I raised an eyebrow. "You're the one who mocked me in front of all your friends. You're the one who got embarrassed because you couldn't handle the truth. So yeah, Ryan, you are the bad guy here." His nostrils flared. For a second, I thought he might actually swing at me. But instead, he turned on his heel and stormed out, slamming the door so hard Emma jumped. Melissa sighed, rubbing her temples. "I don't know how much longer I can do this." I frowned. "Do what?" She gave me a tired look. "Pretend like I'm married to a man who isn't completely falling apart." I didn't say anything, because deep down, I already knew what was coming. Ryan wasn't just losing control of his image, he was losing control of his life. And soon, it was all going to come crashing down. After Ryan stormed off, the tension in the house was thick enough to cut with a knife. Melissa stood there, arms crossed, staring at the door like she was waiting for it to swing open again. But it didn't. Ryan had left, probably to cool off, or maybe just to save himself from more humiliation. I glanced over at Emma, still bouncing happily in the backyard, completely unaware of the mess her father had made. "You okay?" I asked Melissa, keeping my voice low. She let out a long sigh and finally turned to me. "Honestly, I'm embarrassed." That caught me off guard. "Why?" She laughed bitterly, running a hand through her hair. "Because for years, I bought into his act. I thought he had everything handled. I ignored the red flags, the little lies, the way he always brushed me off when I asked about our finances. And now," she gestured to the half-cleaned party mess around us. "Now, it's obvious. He's been lying to himself as much as he's been lying to me." I stayed quiet, letting her talk. "He never wanted to admit we couldn't afford this party. He never wanted to admit we were struggling at all," she continued. "And the second you exposed that, he didn't know how to handle it." I nodded slowly. "Ryan cares more about looking successful than actually being successful." Melissa sighed. "Yeah, and the worst part, I don't even know if he loves us more than he loves his image." That was heavy. I studied her carefully. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" She hesitated, then looked me dead in the eye. "I don't know how much longer I can keep this marriage together." There it was. Melissa had been holding on for so long, trying to keep everything from falling apart. But now she was seeing what I had seen for years. Ryan wasn't a provider. He wasn't a responsible husband or father. He was just a man desperately clinging to the illusion of control. Before I could say anything, the front door slammed open. Ryan was back, and he looked pissed. Ryan stomped back into the house, his face still flushed with anger. His jaw was clenched so tightly I thought his teeth might crack. He didn't even look at me. His eyes were locked on Melissa. "We need to talk," he growled, ignoring my presence entirely. Melissa crossed her arms. "Yeah, we do." I glanced between them, sensing that this wasn't my fight anymore. "I'll give you two some space," I said, stepping toward the door. But Ryan wasn't done with me yet. He turned suddenly, his voice sharp. "Don't act like you're some kind of saint in all this. You didn't help because you care. You helped because you wanted to humiliate me." I smirked. "I helped because your wife asked me to. You humiliated yourself." His nostrils flared, but before he could respond, Melissa cut in. "No, Ryan, you did this. You had months to tell me the truth, to be honest about our finances, to be a responsible husband and father, but instead, you put on a show. You let your ego run this family straight into the ground." Ryan's fists tightened at his sides. "That's not fair," Melissa scoffed. "Not fair? What's not fair is watching you treat your own brother like garbage just because you can't handle the fact that he's more responsible than you." Silence. A deep, crushing silence that made Ryan's face contort with shame. And I knew. He felt it. The reality. The weight of it. The undeniable fact that he had no control over this situation anymore. Melissa exhaled sharply. "I'm done covering for you, Ryan. You need to decide right now. Are you going to own up to your mistakes, or are you going to keep pretending that you're better than everyone else?" Ryan looked at her, then at me. His mouth opened slightly as if he was about to speak, but nothing came out, because for the first time in his life, he had nothing left to say. I sighed. "I'll let you two talk." Then I walked past him, stepping out of the house for the last time that day. As I closed the door behind me, I heard Melissa's voice, low, serious. "We can't keep living like this, Ryan. Something has to change." And somehow, I knew. This was just the beginning of his downfall. I walked to my car, but I didn't leave right away. Instead, I sat in the driver's seat, staring at the house. Even through the closed windows, I could hear Melissa's voice rising. Ryan's was lower, defensive, but it was clear. This wasn't just another argument. This was a breaking point, and honestly, it was about time. For years, Ryan had been coasting through life, acting like the king of his own little world. But now, the cracks were showing, and there was no one left to cover them up. I sighed, gripping the steering wheel. Part of me wanted to stay just in case Melissa needed backup. But I knew this was something they had to handle on their own. As I pulled out of the driveway, my phone buzzed. A text from Melissa. "Melissa, thanks for everything. I don't know what's going to happen yet, but I think I finally see things clearly." I smiled. She was waking up. And Ryan, he was about to face the consequences of his own choices. The next week was Interesting. Ryan didn't reach out. No texts, no calls, total silence. That was unusual for him. Normally, after an argument, even a bad one, he'd find a way to spin things, to make himself the victim, to shift the blame onto someone else. But this time, nothing. Then, a few days later, I got another text from Melissa. Melissa. I told him I'm done. If he doesn't change, I'm taking Emma and leaving. I stared at the message for a long time. I knew Ryan would never admit it, but this was his worst nightmare. Losing his perfect image, losing control over his family, losing the life he pretended was flawless. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I let out a deep breath and typed back, me. Good. You deserve better. And I meant it. Because the truth was, Ryan had spent his whole life putting others down to make himself feel superior. But now, he was out of excuses. He thought he could mock me, belittle me, treat me like a failure. But in the end, I was the one still standing. A month passed. Ryan didn't reach out. Not to me, not to Melissa. The silence wasn't just unusual, it was unsettling. For a guy who had spent his whole life making himself the center of attention, the fact that he had gone completely quiet meant one thing. He was unraveling. Then, one afternoon, I got a call from Melissa. Hey, she said, her voice sounding lighter. Hey, I replied. How are things? She let out a slow breath. Well, it's official. I'm leaving him. I sat up. You serious? Yeah. She sounded tired but certain. I gave him a choice. Get his act together, admit his mistakes, stop pretending he's something he's not. And you know what he did? I already knew the answer. Blew up and blamed everyone else? She laughed, but there wasn't much humor in it. Bingo. He told me I was overreacting, that I should be grateful for the life he built. And when I reminded him that he didn't even pay for his own daughter's birthday party, he called me selfish. I let out a low whistle. Wow, not even surprising. Nope, she sighed. So I told him I was done. I'm taking Emma and moving in with my sister for now. Already packed most of my things. I ran a hand through my hair, letting that sink in. Ryan had finally pushed too far. He thought he could control everything. His image, his finances, his family. But when reality hit, he had nothing left to hold on to. I know it's not easy, I said finally, but I think it's the right call. Melissa's voice softened. Yeah, I think so too. There was a long pause before she added, I just wanted to say thank you, not just for helping with Emma's party, but for making me see the truth. I smiled. You did that on your own. After we hung up, I sat there for a while, thinking. Ryan had spent years making me feel small, mocking me, insulting me, treating me like I was nothing. And yet, I was the one who ended up being the real success story. Not because I had money, not because I had won, but because I was the one who had nothing to prove. Ryan had spent his whole life pretending, and now he had nothing left. Some people build their whole lives around looking successful instead of actually being successful. Ryan thought he had it all: status, reputation, a perfect family. But the second his lies caught up to him, he had nothing left to stand on. I used to let his insults get to me, but now I just feel sorry for him. Ever had someone try to put you down, only for life to humble them instead? Drop your stories in the comments. I'd love to hear them.